Good morning, everyone. My name is Michael Reunert. I work for a company called Conserve Energy. We are a contractor licensed in Oregon, Washington, and just most recently Idaho. We do a lot of energy projects like LED lighting, and then most recently we've been moving into EV chargers because lots of people already have LED lighting. I'd like to start today with a show of hands. How many of you already own an electric vehicle? Show of hands. A few, okay. How many of you know somebody who owns an electric vehicle? Yeah, I was expecting close to 100%. And the third question, how many of you would consider buying an electric vehicle if you're going to buy a new car in the next 2 or 3 years? About half, and that's what the survey says. U.S. averages about 52% of people said in the next 2 or 3 years, if they're buying a car, they would consider an electric vehicle. Part of the reason for that is it's the #1 fastest growing segment in the automobile market today. Last year, 6% of the cars sold in the U.S. were electric vehicles. 6% is not a lot, but it was up 65% from the previous year, so it's really growing fast. If you're out here in the Northwest or on the West Coast, #1 state, California, almost 19% of the cars sold last year were electric vehicles. Tied for #2 is us, Oregon, Washington, Hawaii, at 6%. It's higher in the cities, as you might imagine, as opposed to the more rural areas. I don't have an exact number for Portland, but Seattle number was 12% of cars sold last year were electric vehicles. The message I want you to take away today is EV owners are your customers and your employees. Some of them today, but over the next few years, it's going to probably be the majority of your customers and your employees will be EV car owners. There is a paradigm shift in how we fuel up electric vehicles compared to gas and diesel. If you have a gasoline car and you live in Vancouver, you pull into the gas station, swipe your credit card and start pumping your gas. If you live here in Portland, you pull into the gas station, you wait about 5 minutes for the gas jockey to get over there, and then they take your credit card and they swipe it and they pump your gas, and then a few minutes later they'll come back and unplug it, and so 10 or 15 minutes later you're back on your way. But if you have an electric vehicle, you may have noticed when you pull into the gas station, you're not seeing a bunch of electric chargers. They are not investing in that. Part of the reason is that 80% of the charging of electric vehicles today is done at home. It also tells you something about who today's electric vehicles owners are. They're people with homes, or at least off-street parking. The other 20% is done at commercial chargers. There will be many, many more public chargers installed over the next few years. But that's not going to shift us to everybody going to a public charger. There still will be a lot of at-home charging. That's the big difference. A change in behavior can be a business opportunity. If the gas stations aren't getting that money charging up cars, somebody else can. I'm going to go into some of the details, probably review for most of you, but I want to make sure we're all on the same page. Let's start with just a quick definition of terms. AC, alternating current, back and forth 60 times a second. DC, direct current, from the positive terminal to the negative terminal, no back and forth. A watt is a measure of power. Volts times amps gives you a watt. 1,000 watts is a kilowatt. A kilowatt is about enough to power a toaster. And a kilowatt hour, 1,000 watts for an hour, is enough to run your toaster for an hour. That's the basic terms. When we apply those to EV charging, AC is what comes into our building, alternating current, and DC is what the batteries run on. So we've got to make that conversion from AC to DC. Every electric car you can buy today includes a little battery charger that does that AC to DC conversion. The charging rate, how fast you pump power into a car, usually measured in kilowatts, 1,000 watts. The amount of storage capacity for an average electric vehicle ranges from about 40 to 100 kilowatt hours. So in other words, your electric car could power your toaster for 40 to 100 hours, or it could move you down the road, typically 250 to 350 miles, and that's because they'll get about 1.5 to 4 miles per kilowatt hour. If you have a big F-150 Lightning pickup truck, you're going to be down closer to the 1.5 miles on a kilowatt hour, and if you have a small electric sedan, maybe 3 or 4 miles on that same kilowatt hour of power. And of course, with any vehicle, your mileage may vary. If you're in the business, people talk about levels of charging, level 1, level 2, level 3. I've got a lot more information here that I'm going to go through in detail, But just going through quickly, level 1 is plugging it into a 120 volt outlet, and in 20, 30, 40 hours, you'll have a fully charged car, so a couple of days. That's your fallback. And as I said, every car comes with a plug-in cord and an AC to DC battery charger. Want to charge up a little faster? Now we're talking level 2 is the terminology in the industry. 240 volts in, so the same kind of power you might have for your dryer or your air conditioner at home. And now in 4 or 5 or 6 hours, you can charge up your car. What that means is, this is what typically goes into a home charger. If you pull in at night, when you park your car and plug it in, you can be pretty much guaranteed that by tomorrow morning, you're going to have a fully charged car. Level 3 is the fast charging. Some people call it DC fast charging. Tesla calls them superchargers. 480 volts in, and it does the AC to DC conversion in the level 3 charger, and now it can go much faster. You can charge up your car in typically 15 to 45 minutes, so much closer to at least the Oregon experience of filling up your gas car. The little drawing that I have up here, or the picture, that's from my brother-in-law's car. He plugged into his home charger. You can see the little bar graph. He had about 40% charge, and it told him about 3.5 hours on his level 2 charger, he'll have a fully charged battery, be ready to go. There are both commercial and residential chargers. Residential are typically level 2. Commercial can be level 2 or level 3. And level 1, again, is just your fallback position. The difference between a commercial and a residential charger, the charging part is pretty much the same. The difference is connectivity. So if you pull into your garage and plug in your car, it starts charging. If I pull into your garage and start charging, plug in my car, it starts charging too, because there's no access control, other than maybe your garage door that keeps me out. For a commercial charger, we want to know who's charging. We want to make sure they're paying for it. So every commercial charger will have this connectivity. You'll either scan a QR code with your phone, you may have an RFID, you may swipe a credit card, but some way it'll know who's charging. It will then have monitoring. It will measure how much power you used, and it'll have billing so that you get charged for the power and not me if it's my charger. So that's the big difference between a commercial and a residential charger, is the connectivity. One of the key questions you may ask, all right, I'm interested in chargers, how much do the darn things cost? Residential charger, we're talking typically $500 to $1,000 depending on the capacity and if you got some of the bells and whistles. A commercial level 2 charger, now we're up to about $2,000 to $4,000 because we have some extra pieces added to it. If you want to go with level 3 DC fast charging, now we're up starting at about $40,000, and you can pretty easily get up over $100,000 if you want to put in one of the higher capacity DC fast chargers. The second piece we need, if that was the iPhone, now we need the Verizon or AT&T network, the connectivity. You can do that through Wi-Fi or a LAN if you have that available. If not, you'll need to have a cellular modem. Cellular connectivity for an EV charger will cost you about $100 a year. It's not a high bandwidth connection. There's a software license for somebody. Generally, you don't put your own software on these. You'll pay a few $100s a year for that. And then there'll be transaction fees that they'll charge on the credit card every time somebody plugs in and does a charge. The last piece then is installation. If you already have a 240 volt circuit and you're putting in a level 2 charger, it might be as simple as plugging it in. If you don't have a level 2 circuit, or 240 volt circuit, and maybe it's over here in that building, and you want the chargers over there in the parking lot somewhere, and we have to do some underground trenching, we could well be talking a few $1,000s to get the power from your panel out to where you want the EV chargers to be. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, since this is a facility manager conference, about the building aspects of that. The good news is you don't have to pay all of that cost yourself. Our local utilities do have some programs, some more generous than others. Depending on where you are, it's very important to check, and these have been changing rapidly. The latest what I found is if you're in Vancouver, Clark PUD will give you about $500 for every level 2 charger you put in. If you put in a level 3, they'll give you $1,500 a year credit on your bill. If you're served by Pacific Power, PacifiCorp, they'll give you up to $1,000 a port, 75% of the cost for a typical business. And if you're in multifamily, they're kind of interested in making sure that people who don't have off-street parking have access. They'll give you a little bit more. They'll give you up to $3,000 per port for putting in level 2 chargers. And lastly, Portland General Electric, For a business level 2, they'll give you up to $1,000, and they'll give you 80% of the installation cost up to $6,000, so up to $7,000 per charger. Again, they're a little more generous. If you have a multifamily building, you can get up to $2,300, so up to a total of $8,000 per port, which is a plug to plug in a car. And then if you put in a level 3 charger, $350 per kilowatt capacity. So a level 3 charger is typically somewhere between 50 and 300 kilowatt capacity. You can get up to $25,000 per port for putting in a level 3 charger if you're served by Portland General Electric. So far, so good? Next question you may ask, how do I get my money back? What's the return on investment on an EV charger? There are several ways you can get your money back. The first one, you can just charge for the electricity. A typical charge is about 50 kilowatt hours. Around here, it's 10 cents, less if you're a big building, depending on the rate schedule, depending on your utility, but let's just say round numbers, 10 cents for a kilowatt. So a 50 kilowatt charge is about $5 in cost. If you go to plug into a commercial level 2 charger, they'll typically charge you 20 to 25 cents, so you can see the profit margin. If you want the convenience of a level 3 charger, charging up quickly, they'll charge you more, typically 35 to 50 cents. I don't know if you can see it there. There's the level 3 charger at Freddy's close to my house. They were asking 48 cents when I went and took a look at that one. That's one way to get some of your money back. The next way is bringing in customers that might not otherwise come to your business. So if you have a hotel, a restaurant, a convenience store, a shopping center, more people will come to your store if you have chargers versus somebody else's if they don't have chargers, i.e. the people who have electric cars and might like to charge up. That can bring more business. That can be part of your return on your investment. If you have a multifamily building, an apartment or a condo, when people are looking for a place to live and you're in one of those 52% who might be thinking about buying an electric car, they may well ask, is there a place to plug in my car? If the answer is yes, check the box. If the answer is no, well, maybe they go look to live somewhere down the street. If you have an office building and all your employees are at home doing the remote work thing and you'd kind of like them to come into the office, one of the ways to get them back in might be to have electric vehicle chargers. I saw some over here in the parking garage when I pulled in this morning. Nike's figured that out. A lot of other businesses are figuring that out too. And lastly, if you have a fleet of vehicles, if you switch over to electric vehicles, the charging cost is a lot less than the fueling cost, and the maintenance is a lot less. That's another way you can get return on your charger. In addition to all of this, here in Oregon, and just started in Washington, there are now clean fuel credits that if you apply for those, sign up with the state, you can get about 10 cents per kilowatt hour, so you can essentially cover all the cost of your electricity through these credits available from the state. And then there are grants and other things from the government. So lots of other things that can go into it, a little more detailed than what I had time for today. You're thinking about a charger. Should I get a level 2? Should I get a level 3? Let's talk about where they make sense. Level 2 charger takes several hours. That means 1 or 2 vehicles per day can use an electric charger. Maybe one during the day and one at night would be about the maximum. Actually, I saw out in the parking lot here, they said maximum parking at the charger was 4 hours. So they're trying to get 2 vehicles per day potentially in their parking garage. Somebody who's driving along in their electric car looking for a level 2 charger, how might they choose that? Well, clearly it's going to be somewhere they're going to leave their car for several hours, most likely overnight or all day. They may also look at what's the cost to charge. If you're charging 15 cents and that guy over there is charging 25 cents, they may well come to your 15-cent charger. And finally, they may look at the charging rate. So depending on the size of the charger, the size of the circuit that's feeding it, some chargers will charge up your car more quickly than others. Particularly if you have a big vehicle like one of these electric pickup trucks, you may well look for the higher capacity charger so it'll charge faster. What does this mean? Where does it make sense for a level 2 charger? Multifamily housing for sure. Office parking, going to leave it there all day. And if you have a hotel or motel, if somebody's driving along in their electric car, they'll often ask, can I charge my car overnight here? If they can, that's a mark in your favor. Also, I've noticed Hertz and Avis are starting to, got a big deal with Tesla, bringing out a lot of other electric rental cars. If you have one of those, you may very well look for a hotel where you can plug it in. Other side of the coin, what about a level 3 charger? Oh, no, I'll skip that. Level 3 charger, this is the one that's 15 to 45 minutes. This is more like the filling station for gas. And that means you can have 6, 8, 10, 12 cars potentially per day using that same charger. When someone's driving along in their vehicle, you're going to look, same thing you do if you're driving down the highway looking for gas. Is there a gas station that's close to the highway? Easy off, easy back on again. That'll be one of the key things. What's the location? And then is it somewhere I'm going to have 20, 45 minutes to spend? Can I get a bite to eat? Can I do a little shopping? Is there something else I can be doing rather than just sitting in my car and waiting for charge and maybe looking at my phone? A key point here people will look for is what's the charging rate. Is it a 50 kilowatt fast charger or a 300 kilowatt fast charger? If it's me driving down the highway, I may well very look for that 300 kilowatt, right? I'm looking for that faster charging rate. I don't really want to sit there very long. But I'll also look, what's the charge? If this guy's charging 35 cents, that guy's charging 55 cents, maybe I could wait a little bit longer and I might go over to the 35-cent guy. Where does that make sense? Places you're going to spend 20, 30, 40 minutes. Restaurant, retail, convenience store, located close to a major highway is probably one of the areas that makes most sense for a level 3 charger. If you have a fleet or valet parking, so that you want to charge up a lot of vehicles, 15, 20, 30 minutes apiece, another great application. And if you're a car dealer, more and more car companies are bringing out electric vehicles. When they deliver them to the car company, to the dealer, they're not charged up, so you got to charge them all up. If you have a service department, you may want to just plug in each car for about 10 minutes, make sure you give the car back to the consumer with the same or higher charge level than where you started. That's another place we're seeing a lot of level 3 chargers going in. So, for the facility managers, it's the last piece I wanted to cover today. What do I need to have on my property if I want to put in electric vehicle chargers? If you want to put in a level 2 charger, you need 240 volt service, and ideally somewhere between 40 and 100 amp circuit for each charger. That allows you to give the maximum charging rate to each customer. The higher capacity is better if you can, because charging rates are going up. It's limited by what the car will take, and manufacturers realize that customers would like to charge faster, so they've been increasing the size of those little battery chargers that do the AC to DC conversion in the car. And then the second thing you need is internet connectivity, either through your local area network or a cellular connection, so you can do all of the access control, billing, and that kind of stuff. Level 3 charger, now we're talking 480 volt, 3-phase power, ideally 100 to 600 amp circuit per charger. And if you want to have one of the really fast 300 kilowatt chargers, you're now looking at that 600 amp circuit. Higher capacity, faster charger, and once again, you need internet connectivity. So you may be saying, well, that's all great. What if I don't have it? There are a couple things you can do. The first one is commercial EV chargers, because they have this connectivity, they talk to each other in addition to talking to the internet. So you can put more than one charger on the same circuit. They'll know what the circuit capacity is. Let's say you have a 50 amp circuit, you put 3 chargers on it. The first car it comes and pulls in on a 50 amp circuit, you're allowed to pull 80% of that, so 40 amps is the maximum you could pull. If your charger's big enough, the car will take it. That first car comes in, he gets 40 amps. The second car comes and plugs into the second charger. Now they say if we both pull 40 amps, we're going to trip the circuit breaker. So they will automatically reduce the power available. There are different ways you can do it. The simplest is you can say, all right, 50-50, you both get 20 amps. The good news, we don't trip the circuit breaker. The bad news, it takes a little bit longer to charge up. That's the first option. The other option, if you really want to have a lot more chargers and you really want to future-proof, is to put in a new service, not just for the building, but also for your EV chargers. If you're looking at level 2, you want to do 5, 6, 7, maybe 10, potentially up to 12. You need about a 400 amp service. So putting in the new box, the breakers, running the power out to your chargers. Talking with my electricians, they say, ballpark it 10 or 15 grand. Got a few more chargers you want to have, or a higher capacity level 2 chargers. Might be a little nicer to go up to 800 amp service, 15 to 20K. And if you want to put in level 3 chargers, yes, sir?
Is that per, or is that for
So this 800 amp service would serve 8 to 20 chargers, depending on how generous you want to be and how much power you give to each charger. That make sense?
Okay, so the 220 amp for that setup.
That would get you all the wiring, all of your wiring, from including a panel, switchgear, breakers, underground wiring over to your, again, it depends on how far you go. These are just ballpark numbers. Level 3, you need 480 volt service. Ideally, you'd like to have that 600 amps per, so if you put in a 1200 amp service, you could have two 300, 350 kilowatt level 3 chargers. 25 to 30K is ballpark for that. Then the last piece you need then is a new service coming from the drop, from the utility pole down to your power. Depending on who you're working with, a lot of utilities would like to get new customers. They understand that EVs are coming. They may do that for nothing. They may say, I'm going to make my money down the road. Other utilities may say, no, I want a few $1,000s. The final caveat is 480 volt service is not available everywhere. So you'll have to check with the utility and say, is it available at or close to my building, or would that be a major build out for the utility, and then you'll have to work with them. I'm being very conscious of leaving time for Amy, so that's what I wanted to cover today. Hopefully, what you'll take away are that EV owners are your customers and your employees. I am hopeful that you came away with a high-level understanding of EV chargers. I tried to cover a lot of material in a short period of time, and maybe a little bit of an overview of the economics. And if all goes well, maybe I've piqued your interest, and you might be thinking about EV chargers for your facility. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Amy for micro-mobility, and then we'll both come back up for questions at the end.
Thank you so much. Is this on yet? Can you all hear me? Okay, great. My name's Amy Summers. So excited to see you all today. It's one of my favorite events of the year, and it's so nice to see so many familiar faces and new faces here today. We both said we were going to talk really fast, so just we're leaving room for questions, so that's why I'm going to be going over this high-level overview of micromobility pretty quickly. Here's my agenda here. I'll be going over what is micromobility, the potential environmental impact of implementing some of these solutions, where the market is headed, and how you consider it as a facility manager. So just some background on me. My name's Amy Summers. I founded Spring Forward Sustainability Consulting. My background is in various sustainability programs for utility and governments. And I also trained as a commercial electrician for 4 years, so the AC/DC talk was really, brought me back, right back to the apprenticeship there. So we offer program design, market intelligence and reporting, and outreach and education services for your businesses and environmental programs. So let's get into it. I'm sure a lot of you are asking, what is micromobility? So it's an umbrella term. It covers pretty much any small electric vehicle that's smaller than a car. So when you're thinking of e-bikes, e-scooters, neighborhood electric vehicles or golf carts, little three-wheeler pods are coming out now, and e-dirt bikes, they have all sorts of different options now for micromobility solutions. But when you boil it down, micromobility can be defined as personal mobility. So the focus of the vehicle is moving a person. So you might think that's every car, right? But it's a little more nuanced than that. When you use a personal vehicle and it's just one person driving a car, 80% of the space in that vehicle is actually not being used. So you're using all of this energy, whether it's electric or gas powered, to move this 2 tons of steel, when you might not actually need that much. Might be overkill for the purpose of what you're using it for. And that has an environmental impact associated with it. So real simple view of US carbon dioxide emissions overall. Transportation makes up 38% of CO2 emissions in our country. 58% of those transportation emissions are personal vehicle use. So it's pretty important to start looking at how we use these vehicles and try to start chipping away at that big chunk of CO2 emissions in the country. So the first thing we want to look at is, how do we use vehicles? How do we use these personal vehicles? And right now we use them for long trips, short trips, carpooling, driving one person, carrying cargo, and commuting back and forth to the same place every day. So it's kind of a catch-all for all of these different purposes. And so you use that same baseline level of energy usage, whether you're using the full functionality of that vehicle or not. So what we want to do by looking at micromobility is how do we decouple that usage and try to right size your transportation based on what you're using it for. So we already do this with a lot of longer trips. We use larger shared transportation options in planes, trains, buses, for all different types of transportation for that, but we haven't really decoupled those short trips. So that's what micromobility steps in to do. And you might think, well, if you're just replacing the short trips, how much of an environmental impact could that actually be if they're just those short trips? It could actually be a really big impact. So when you look at how we actually take these trips, 50% of all trips are less than 5 miles, and then another 20% are between 5 and 10 miles. So that's 70% of all personal vehicle trips could actually be used, sometimes at least, with micromobility options. And with where we're headed, the trajectory we're headed with the number of drivers we're adding to the road, we're on track to raise our emissions even if we make every car that we currently use into an EV, just because there's going to be that many people on the road. So if we employ micromobility for some of these trips, we could actually double the number of drivers by cutting our emissions in half. So it's something worth looking at. Is there a market for this, though? If you look worldwide, right now there already is. In Europe, e-bikes outsell cars 10 to 1. In China, they outsell cars 20 to 1. And in the US, e-bikes already outsell EVs by 18%. They're smaller, cheaper, you can have one in addition to a car. And in Oregon, between 2019 and 2021, Oregon e-bike sales actually quadrupled. A lot of this is through the shared e-scooter and e-bike fleets, but a lot of people are actually buying them for their own personal commutes and fun anyways. So there's every reason for governments to incentivize micromobility solutions. Thinking back actually to what the EV market was like in 2011, I worked for State of California's electric vehicle incentive program at the time. It looks really similar to what micromobility looks like right now. People are still wrapping their heads around, how can I incorporate this new technology into my life? It's still pretty new, and now, as you can see, EVs are everywhere. No one really questions it. It's just a matter of bolstering the infrastructure so that we can charge everywhere and make it more convenient. So in addition to those emissions reductions that I already talked about, there are all these other reasons for government to incentivize micromobility solutions. Safer roads, reduced traffic congestion and road degradation, reducing strain on the electrical grid, especially when we're transferring over to EVs from internal combustion engines, more affordable transportation options, and alleviating parking strain, which I'm sure we've all dealt with recently. But we're still early in the market, so there are not a lot of incentives to speak of at this point. So even talking about where the market is and how fast micromobility solutions are selling, that's with very little infrastructure and very few incentives. So this is just a screenshot of a new interactive map that Micromobility Industries has put out. They have a lot of really great reviews about different micromobility options, and you can actually click around all around the world and see where the incentives are for e-bikes right now. So right now in Oregon, there's only a few local incentives in a few different cities. But there's actually a bill going through the Oregon legislature right now, which would offer between $1,200 and $1,700, depending on whether you're buying a standard e-bike or a cargo bike. So I'm going to keep an eye on that and probably have a blog post seeing where that goes from here. So as a facility manager, how do you incorporate this into managing your facility and into your sustainability strategy? One option is to incorporate an employee benefit program for your employees that includes an incentive for e-bikes. This is a new offering that I have through Spring Forward, where I actually work with the micromobility manufacturers to get a discount for your employees that you can pass on to them. For the employee, it's great because they might have already been looking at getting an e-bike for themselves, and now they have this perk where they can commute to and from work with this new subsidized e-bike. It's very convenient for them, and they get this discount. As an employer, when you offer this benefit to your employees, it shows that you have this workplace culture and these values of sustainability that they agree with, but also you can ask some very simple questions about how their commute has changed since they started using micromobility, and I'll be able to give you a measurable impact on your emissions reductions for your company that you can incorporate in your ESG reporting, in your sustainability marketing materials, or possibly even in something like a Fitwel certification if you have those hard numbers behind it. In addition to that, parking is another main thing that you need to think about when you're thinking about micromobility and how it could be useful for you. Parking has a ton of movement going on it right now with local regulations on it. I could do a whole other talk just on parking, but today I'll just kind of boil it down to a few key concepts. So with climate action plans in a lot of local governments, either parking requirements they're totally going away, or people are making restrictions on what type of parking you can include in new building. So this is to discourage cars in urban areas because of all of the different problems associated with it. Because of that, say you're that same employee who has trouble finding parking every single day, you have to spend 15 minutes trying to find parking before you go to work in the morning. Now you have this subsidized micromobility solution. You have parking spot maybe designated for micromobility up front. Maybe you have your level 2 chargers, and at the same time, your workplace has thought of some extra regular 110 charging that you can plug into and have your battery safely charging throughout the day for your e-bike or your scooter. Now it's convenient, it's cheap, and you, as an employer, you can fit maybe 4 or 5 employees in the same parking spot that used to only fit 1 car. So really the moral of the story here is micromobility is not a one-size-fits-all solution, but it's something that can be added to all of your other sustainability strategies to start chipping away at your impact. And we're looking ahead as a facility manager to what's coming next. So if you have any questions about this, please feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to help design a program with you or keep you informed about what's coming up with those incentives. Thank you so much. Come on up. Any
about
questions?
10 minutes left in the session. We are available now for any questions that you have that you want to say in front of everybody else, or you can talk to us after. So are there any questions on either presentation? Anything you'd like to know?
I didn't catch, were there incentives for e-bikes or the same that should be?
There are just a few local incentives, and there is a statewide incentive that's going through legislature right now, but has not been approved yet. So it's something to keep an eye out because it might be coming down the road.
What else would you like to know?
Who's running that bill, state legislature? You know, who's the bill?
I don't
They
remember,
asked
sorry.
to repeat the question.
Oh, who's running the bill through the state legislature? I don't remember. I know it got passed along because someone recently left and passed it along to someone else, so I'd have to look that up, sorry.
Yes, sir.
The EV cars, are they all universal or standardized on the plug, and is that all the same now? And Teslas will plug in everywhere, and
Can you quickly get to that slide that I had in my backup slides or not? I had a slide on that because I was short on time. I didn't put it on. Let's see if we can get that up here quickly. Here we go, yeah. So level 2 charging, there are essentially 2 plugs out there. The standard J1772, which every car has except for Tesla, has their own connector. But the Teslas all come with an adapter. So every car, level 2, if you put in one of these J1772, every car out there today can plug in. For level 3, there is the additional 2 ports you can see. The CCS is that same charger with 2 additional ports for high-speed charging. Tesla has their own, and then there's this CHAdeMO. The only manufacturer that uses that, it's actually a Japanese standard, would be if you get a Nissan Leaf today for high-speed charging, it comes with the CHAdeMO. Teslas can all plug into this as well. They have an adapter for that. And I've just in the last, few weeks, Tesla has started rolling out adapters on some of their superchargers so that you can basically, call it the magic something or other. You can get it to come out of the Tesla supercharger with this adapter so you can charge something other than a Tesla. They are being pushed into this by the US government. They've already done it in Europe, and they're being pushed by the US government because the US government will not give you funding for additional chargers unless it has the universal charger on it.
so do Tesla owners then they carry some sort of adapter or something that fits on the standard?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Did your cost include the charging unit itself?
No. Well, it depends. So the first thing I told you is what the charging unit costs. So if you want a commercial level 2, $2 to $4 grand, ballpark. If you want a commercial level 3, anywhere from 40 grand up to 150, 200 grand. That's the charger. And then those other charges I had, costs I had were just infrastructure costs if you're putting in new service to feed your chargers.
Amy, do you
Yes.
have examples of roll-up programs, any of the documentation or paperwork that we could use for our corporate offices? You can say, here's an example of how it's worked and so on and so forth.
Absolutely. I can talk to you after about getting you something with that. There's also some really good resources from TREC. It's the Transportation Research Education Council, I think. So they're a nationwide research organization about transportation. So they have a lot of really good stuff about micromobility and urban planning around transportation. And they're actually based out of PSU. So they've got some really good stuff locally too.
Yes, sir.
Again, for the chargers, sorry, that's my focus right
Yep.
now. Are you seeing in those facilities purchase and own the charging station, or are there third-party companies that provide that and then you rent it from them?
So now I'm going to remember to repeat the question. The question was, do most people buy their own chargers or do they get them through a third-party company? And the answer is yes. There are both options out there. You can buy your own charger. The advantage to doing that is now you set the pricing, you set the access, you do it all. The disadvantage is you have to think about that, work with typically the third-party software supplier, and you have to pay the money up front. There are other people who, for little or no upfront money, will put the whole thing in, they'll manage it, but they'll set the pricing, and they'll set all the policies, and then they'll give you some of the money back.
Thank you.
Anything else before we let you go? Yeah?
Is there any, this is just going to think outside the box, but is there any, like, just solar to direct charging? Eliminating the utility?
So the question is
Yeah, at sunny spots, sunny parking lot, can you just go, I mean, obviously it would be faster.
the question is there any solar to car charging? There is a company here, I think they're based in Portland, called Charlie Charge, CHARLI. And I don't know how many they put in, but certainly that's what they're advertising. It. They have this kind of big solar, like a carport thing that they put out in a parking lot or something that does have solar panels, brings it down. Typically, they'll put a battery in there too, so that you're kind of trickle charging that battery, and then you can more quickly charge your car. So the answer is yes, but it's not everywhere.
Anything else?
Going once, going twice.
Feel free to catch us after this with any other questions you have. Always happy to keep talking about this stuff.
All right, thank you for showing.
Thanks so much.